Hello and welcome. I'd like to provide a demonstration solution to our previous challenge, which was implementing a guess a number type game. So let's bring up code blocks, close my current project, and create a new one. This new project I'm just going to call guess number game. Oops. And it's going to be a console application. So I'm just going to call it guess the number. And what I'm going to do in this, to start this project, is I'm going to declare my variables. I always like to declare and initialize my variables at the top. But I also am going to use the random number generator, so I want to make sure that I have a couple includes. Standard lib is already there by default, so all I need to do is add my time.h. Because again, this is for random number generator. This is basically for the random number generator seed. The other variables that I'm going to need in this program is I want to store my random number, so I'm just going to say random number. I'm going to initialize that to 0 until I get it from the actual library. So declare initialize. I'm going to create a variable to store the guess from the user, and I'm going to initialize that with 0. I'm going to create another variable which is going to be the number of guesses, the current number of guesses. Or actually, I should say maximum number of guesses. Maximum number of guesses. And I'm going to initialize this to 5 because they can only guess 5 times. I also have to create a time variable so that I can use it for my random number generator. So I'm just going to say time t. First thing I want to do before I ask the user for input is I want to generate the random number. I guess I could do this after asking the user for input, but it's just as easy to do it the first thing you do it. So I'm going to initialize my random number generator. I'm going to put a little comment in there. Make sure you use good, meaningful names. And make sure you indent. So initialization, is it spelled wrong? Yep. Got an I again. And this is all this is going to do is it's going to use that srand function that I talked about in the lecture. You can just pass it in a seed, essentially. So I'm going to say unsigned, and I'm going to just pass in my t variable. This is going to get time as a function that gets the current time. I'm going to pass in the t so that it seeds it. And then I'm going to end it. Now I actually need to get my random number generator, so I'm going to say get the random number. And all this is going to do is assign a variable to what's returned from the rand function. So I'm going to say random number, which is my local variable, equal to, I'm going to use the assignment operator, say rand, which is calling a function. You don't need to know any of this, but I'm going to seed it with 21. This will ensure that my random number is only between 0 and 20. Okay? Now I'm going to just output a couple messages to the screen so that the user knows what they're doing. So I'm going to do a printf, and I'm going to say, I'm going to make sure I have line feeds. I'm going to say this is a guessing game. And then I'm going to also tell them that I have chosen a number between 0 and 20. Again, just so they're informed. And then 0 and 20, which you must guess, and end it with a line feed. All right, now that I told them what I want in the game, I'm going to actually start looping. And I'm going to loop until my number of guesses is equal to 5. So what I would actually rather do is I want to declare my number of guesses up here, but I don't want to initialize it. I want to initialize it in my loop, just to show you that I can do that. If I did initialize it there, I could just keep the first before the first semicolon in the for loop, I could keep it empty. So for example, I could do something like this, initialize it up here, and then in my for loop, I would just put a semicolon because I don't need to do any initialization. Because remember, in our for loop, the first thing you have before the semicolon is the initialization of the loop control variable. I've already initialized it, so I don't need to do it. But I don't want to do that. I'm going to just declare it up here, and I'm going to initialize it down here. I'm going to say maximum number of guesses equals 5. That's my loop control variable. I'm going to initialize it. I'm going to jump out of the loop if my maximum number of guesses is reached. So here I would say actually, I'm going to write it a different way. I'm going to write it so that the loop goes from 5 to 0. So if my maximum number equals 5, then I can just say my maximum, and maybe it would be better to rename this variable. Let's rename it and say number of guesses. And the number of guesses is going to start off as 5. And when I get to, and I'm going to make this go backwards. And when the number of guesses is 0, I want to jump out of the loop. So in my loop exit condition, I'm going to say number of guesses is greater than 0. See what I'm doing here? I'm only going to jump out of the loop if I have no more guesses left. So if I'm greater than 0, I'm going to stay inside the loop. And then my last thing I want to provide in the for loop after the second semicolon is modification of that loop control variable. So I'm just going to do a minus number of guesses. And what you should notice in this for loop is that I'm going backwards almost. I'm starting at 5 and I'm going to 0. For all the examples we provided in the lecture, we start at 0 and we go up. But you can do both. It doesn't matter. You're still iterating here 5 times. Now I want to display a message telling them how many tries they have left. So I'm going to say printf. And this is just going to be and actually I'm going to incorporate the ternary operator here since we haven't used it. You don't need to do it this way, but I'm going to do it this way just to show you how you can use the ternary operator. So here I'm going to print out you have %d tries %s left. And I'm going to put %d is going to be equal number of guesses. And tr %s, it's going to change. It's either going to be tries or it's going to be try. And so I'm going to change what's displayed based on how many guesses I have left. If the number of guesses is equal to 1, I don't want to print out tries. 1 tries left? That doesn't make sense. I want to print out 1 try. So here I'm going to use the ternary operator, or more precisely the conditional operator. I'm going to say if number of guesses equal 1, then set number of guesses equal to y, else set it to IES. And I'm going to print it. That's what the %s is doing, whatever is returned here. So this is going to return either a y or an IES and display the correct information. So I just did that just to be a little fancy, show you how you can use the ternary operator, print out the right information. After I printed out the number of tries left, then I want to tell them to enter a guess. So I'll put some information and just say printf, please, or just enter a guess. And this will be a line feed, and have a line feed. So enter a guess. And then I'm going to read in that guess using scanf. We know how to read from the keyboard. It's going to be an integer, so I'm going to do %d, and I'm going to put it in the guess variable. So I need to use the ampersand. There we go. Now I have to do my checking. I have to check if the guess is the guess that I'm concerned about. So here is where we can use we have another exit condition. I'm going to use an if statement. I'm going to say if my guess is equal to my random number, what do I want to do? Well, first I want to print out and tell them that they guessed correctly. So I'm going to print out congratulations, you guessed it. What else do I want to do if they guessed correctly? I want to exit the loop. So how can I exit the loop? I could put break. I could do a break. That will jump out of my loop. Now, if it wasn't equal, so I want to add an else if. If it's not equal, I want to check to make sure they validated their number. So before I said you could have a nested loop. for validation so that they enter again, you don't need to do that. You can just have an if statement. So here I want to validate the number. If it's not equal to the random number, I want to make sure it's between 0 and 20. So if the guess is less than 0, or we're using a logical operator or two parallel bars, or the guess is greater than 20, which is basically checking for an invalid guess. If that is the case, and I'm not going to use a bracket because I only have one statement here. Brackets are optional if you only have one statement. So if they entered an invalid guess, all I'm going to do is printf. I'm going to print out I said the number is between 0 and 20. And what will happen here is nothing. It's just going to print that out, and it's going to go to the next iteration. It's going to tell them how many tries they have left, and it's going to enter a guess. Now, if you didn't want valid numbers, if they entered valid numbers not to count as a guess, then you can have a nested loop. But since we're going to count if they entered something 25, it's still going to count as a guess. So I just say I set a number between 0 and 20. If they entered a valid number but it wasn't correct, that would be the else clause. Here, I'm just going to say, sorry, wrong number, and I'm going to tell them whether it's greater than or lower than. And I could use the ternary operator here, but I'm not going to. So let's add an if here too. Else if guess is, or I should say, if random is greater than guess, then what do I want to print? I want to print out, sorry, %d is wrong. %d will be their guess. My number is, %s is first word, is, if the random is greater, my number is greater. My number is greater than that. And I don't use the %s, and I just have a line feed. Right? Else, if the random number is less than guess, then I want to tell them it's lower. So I can do the copy and paste the same thing. I can say, sorry, number's wrong. My number is less than that. And again, you could actually put these two else ifs. You could have one else if, and you could actually make a ternary, a conditional statement here. You could have the ternary operator. But I'm going to use two else ifs and say it's less than that. And then that's going to be it. That's going to end the loop. And if we get outside of the loop and we didn't guess correctly and we exceeded our number of tries, then I'm just going to tell them that they had 5 tries and they didn't guess the number. And I'm going to tell them the number. So a last output to the user to tell them that they didn't win the game and tell them what the number was. So you have had 5 tries and failed. The number was random number. Okay, so does that make sense? We're doing a lot of things here. We're using if statements, else statements in a loop. And we're implementing the number game. And then the last thing is we return from the main function. So let's go ahead and compile. And what should you have been doing throughout this whole exercise? You should have been testing and working in small chunks. You probably should have started working first, just get the random number to work. And then test and compile. Compile and test. Then start your loop. Make sure your loop runs for only the number of guesses. 5 times max. And then get that to work and test. Then ask the user to enter some information. Get that to work and test. Then compare to when to exit. If they guess correctly, test. And then write your if statements, test. That's how I would implement. So let's build this and see if it compiles. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. I'm going to say build. I do have an error. I have a invalid number. It has to be random number, not random, because that's the name of my variable. Try it again. And this time I have 0 errors, 2 warnings. I have a %d expects a matching int. I forgot to put out the random number, or the guess. The guess here and the guess in the other one. I want to tell them that their guess was, sorry, guess was wrong. Don't have to do this, but just a little nice thing. Now let's build it, because you always want to fix your warnings. You want to have 0 warnings, 0 errors. Now when we run this, we have to test. And there's many different test cases you want to run here. You'll want to run multiple test cases, because remember, it's never good to just test one thing. So here it says, this is a guessing game. I have chosen a number between 0 and 20, which you must guess. You have 5 tries left. So I'm going to put in 16. Sorry, 16 is wrong. The number is less than that. I'm going to try having it, 8. 8 is wrong, less than that. I'm going to do 4. 4 is wrong. My number is greater than that. Oh, I made a mistake. I didn't read that first. So it's greater than 8. Let's try 12. I only have 2 tries left. I guessed it right with 12. So it says congratulations. But you'll also want to test a failure. You'll want to test a few things here. But here, let me test. And I'm going to say my guess. And I'm just going to put in 0. 0 is wrong. I'm going to keep putting in 0. And there, I guessed 5 times. I was wrong. It says you have had 5 tries and failed. The number that you wanted to guess was 3. So that works. Now let's test to make sure what happens if we enter invalid numbers. If I enter 45. I said the number is 0 and 20. So that's another test case. And it counted as a try. If I didn't want that to count as a try, I could have a nested loop. I think that's about it. We've tested all the cases. We tested the cases where you guessed successfully. We've tested the case where you didn't guess successfully. And we tested the case where you entered an invalid number. And I don't think... Maybe the only other test would be is if you... to make sure that it was saying greater than and lower than. Which I think we tested in the first one, would actually told us to enter lower or greater than. Right? So let's try that. So in this time, I'm going to enter 20. It says less than, which is good. Now I'm going to enter 10. Oh, and I guessed it. So I guessed it quick. But we should see less than and greater than in the same output. Try it again. And the random number is working because I'm generating different numbers each time I run the program. 20 is wrong. Now let's try 19. Okay, let's try 1. And it's greater than that. So I see greater and less than, so I'm pretty good sure it's working. Looks pretty good to me. So a neat little program. I hope this helped you learn a lot about the looping and all of your decision statements. And really problem solving. Hopefully you got this out and designed this before you actually started writing code. That's always important. Hope this helps. I'll provide the source code so you can compare it and see and analyze it. Thank you.